Welcome to the Kottke Ride Home for Friday, January 15th, 2021. I'm Jackson Bird. A couple of stories for the birds today. First, ravens at the Tower of London are living up to their collective name of a conspiracy of ravens by possibly foretelling the fall of Britain. And a pigeon in Australia who was almost sentenced to death by government officials, plus the many ways in which Wikipedia is like an MMORPG. And because I know we all want to relive it so badly, introducing 2020 the game. Here are some of the cool things from the news today. Not that I have room to talk as an American, but Britain's been having a pretty tough go of things lately. They've been locked down again as COVID cases continue to surge, being the origin of the more contagious B117 strain. Brexit continues to pull the nation further apart from each other and from members of the European Union, causing obstacle after obstacle as they adjust to their new non-EU normal. And as if their actual challenges weren't worrying enough as to the future of the nation, a centuries-old prophecy spelling doom for the realm may just have been fulfilled. So, a number of ravens live at the Tower of London in England, the historic castle and former prison on the bank of the River Thames, where many executions took place over the years, including 2 of the wives of Henry VIII. It's also where the crown jewels are held. It's a massive tourist attraction, and one of the sights people go there to see, or at least are bombarded with upon arrival, is the tower's ravens. Ravens are native to Britain, and centuries ago used to be more commonplace, even in towns, and it's presumed that back then they just naturally inhabited the Tower of London. And when raven populations decreased and ravens weren't naturally around town as much, a few started being held in captivity in the tower. Now, at some point, there came a royal decree that there always must be, at minimum, 6 ravens kept in the tower. And this was in part due to a prophecy with very murky origins. The prophecy says that if the Tower of London ravens are lost or fly away, the crown will fall, and Britain with it. Now, while it's said that the prophecy dates back to the time of Charles II in the 17th century, most people these days believe it was probably made up in the Victorian era, like so much else. You'd be surprised how much both in Britain and America that we think dates back to the Middle Ages or the colonial era was actually just made up in the 1800s. But still, the legend of the ravens protecting the realm is good tourist fodder, so the captive ravens are kept with clipped wings, extravagant health diets, and lots of care and protection from the tower's raven master. But for all these efforts, things do still go astray at times, and most recently, a raven named Merlina, the queen of the group, went missing. After being gone for about a month, the Tower of London has announced that her, quote, continued absence indicates to us that she may have sadly passed away, end quote. So now the raven count has fallen below 6. Does this mean the kingdom is about to fall? I mean, maybe, but not because of the ravens. These ravens are treated like royalty in so many ways, including the keeping of spare heirs. Christopher Scaife, the Raven Master, says they have 7 in total, so there's no immediate need to fill Merlina's vacancy. So despite being bored and restless during lockdown without the fawning attention and illicit snacks from tourists, the ravens at the Tower of London are fine, and it seems won't be precipitating the fall of the realm anytime soon. But still, for a nation that can't seem to catch a break lately, the almost fulfillment of a prophecy about the fall of state is a tad ominous. So another recent bird-related story that has risen to the level of international concern is that of a pigeon named Joe, who until very recently had been sentenced to death by officials in Australia. So a Melbourne man named Kevin Silly Bird, who told the New Daily that he has no interest in birds other than his last name, to which I say, same Kevin, same. Anyways, so Mr. Silly Bird spotted an emaciated pigeon in his backyard at the end of December and gave him some water and a bit of biscuits. And since Silly Bird was feeding the tired bird, it kept coming back as it recovered, and Silly Bird decided to name him Joe, after the U.S. Vice President-elect Joe Biden. But he also noticed that Joe had a blue band on his leg, and a number on the band led Cellybird to contact the American Racing Pigeon Union that the number appeared to correspond to. The organization was able to look up the number, but the owner of the pigeon with that number was not replying. Now, in the meantime, now that the pigeon was suspected to have come from the United States, allegedly traveling 8,000 miles from Oregon to Melbourne, Australia's Agricultural Department began calling for Joe to be killed. The department said Joe posed a biosecurity risk and could compromise the nation's wild bird populations and poultry industry. Acting Prime Minister Michael McCormack said, quote, "If Joe has come in a way that has not met our strict biosecurity measures, then bad luck, Joe. Either fly home or face the consequences." End quote. Though other officials disagreed, the health minister for Victoria, the state where Melbourne is located and Joe has been residing, urged the federal officials to show compassion. Activists, as well as people on Twitter, asked for Joe to be pardoned. Others questioned why he couldn't be quarantined, especially since Australia has become so savvy with quarantine over this past year. Now, backing up for a second, could a pigeon even fly the 8,000 miles across the Pacific Ocean? Lucas Kramer, the owner of a pigeon racing challenge in the States, told the Associated Press that it could be possible because he could hop a ride on a ship. And the New Daily adds that the alleged long-distance record for a pigeon flight was from France to Vietnam in 1931, a distance of just under the amount Joe would have needed to travel from Oregon to Melbourne. But it's all moot because officials at the American Pigeon Racing Union have declared the leg band on Joe to be counterfeit. The folks at Pigeon Rescue Melbourne had suspected this, writing on Facebook that the kind of band Joe had is most likely a knockoff that can easily be bought on eBay, and that they see a lot of Australian pigeons with them. Apparently, people really into pigeon racing will sometimes trade and ship pigeons all around the world, which sounds kind of terrible, in my opinion. But anyways, the union confirmed that the number on Joe's band corresponds with a different pigeon in America who doesn't look like Joe and who, while in the racing system, had not achieved any stats to make him valuable enough to have his identity stolen. Australia's Agricultural Department investigated the counterfeit claim and have agreed that is the case, so Joe, the Australian pigeon, has officially been pardoned and is continuing to live happily in Cellybird's backyard. With the way my lifestyle changed in 2020, I realized I needed to make staying fit a bigger priority. I wasn't getting my usual activity in naturally from running errands and commuting around the city, so it became extra important to make time for intentional activity. And that's what I'm focusing on in 2021, setting aside more time to be active and push myself physically. Whether you're also looking to add more exercising to your 2021 schedule or have other activity goals, FitBot can create a personalized fitness program that continually adapts to you. FitBot takes the intimidation and guesswork out of finding what works for you by learning your abilities and building a dynamic program that adjusts as you go. It's awesome watching the app adjust workouts the more that I do, letting me know when my muscles have recovered, and letting me customize settings based on the equipment I have available at home. I don't have to adapt anything, I can just open the app and go. The FitBot understands that the path to achieving your best looks different for everyone, which is why their algorithm uses data and analytics to help you build on your last workout to maximize your results. It's super easy to use with HD video tutorials to reference for any exercises you may not have encountered before, and it syncs with apps like Apple Health, Fitbit, and Strava. So get your body out of hibernation and start the year off stronger than ever with FitBod. You can get 25% off a membership when you sign up now through February 28th at fitbod.me/Kotke. That's 25% off your membership at fitbod.me/Kotke. At this time of year, I always tend to find myself motivated to try learning something new, being more productive, and tapping into my creative side. And today's sponsor, Skillshare, can help with all of the above and more. Skillshare is an online learning community that offers membership with meaning. With so much to explore, real projects to create, and the support of fellow creatives, Skillshare empowers you to accomplish real growth. Their class topics range from video production and animation to web development and UX design, as well well as creative writing, entrepreneurship, lifestyle classes, and more. One thing I'm always trying to strive for is working smarter, not necessarily harder, so I've really been vibing with Greg McCown's class, Simple Productivity, How to Accomplish More with Less. It's all about figuring out your essential priorities and escaping distractions so that you can do more and feel better about what you do. There are so many different aspects of your own life and goals to explore and dig deeper into on Skillshare, and it's incredibly affordable, especially when compared to pricey in-person classes and workshops. An annual subscription is less than $10 a month. And for listeners of the Kottke Ride Home, you can explore your creativity at Skillshare.com/Kottke and get a free trial of premium membership. That's 2 weeks free at Skillshare.com/Kottke. Again, go to Skillshare.com/Kottke for a free trial of premium membership. Today, January 15th, is Wikipedia Day, the anniversary of the launch of the site and the very first edit on Wikipedia. And this year, it's a particularly big deal because it is the 20th anniversary of the site. They're broadcasting a virtual celebration at 6 p.m. Eastern Time tonight, so if you were listening to this podcast right after it dropped, you might still have a chance to join. Link in the show notes either way, because, maybe they'll make it available to watch back afterwards, I don't know. But with the anniversary, you can imagine, and have maybe seen yourself, a lot of people are sharing cool stories and facts about Wikipedia, and one that stood out to me was an in-joke among Wikipedia editors that Wikipedia itself is an MMORPG. Quoting Wired, "At first blush, there do not appear to be many similarities between editing the Internet Encyclopedia and playing Dungeons & Dragons, yet proponents of the RPG metaphor see numerous resemblances to both tabletop RPGs and their online counterparts." According to this humorous and continuously evolving essay composed by Wikipedians, the Wikipedia game world consists of 6.2 million unique locations, read English Wikipedia articles, 40.6 million players, Wikipedia editors, and the common villains are the trolls who disrupt articles in boss fights, the edit wars that sometimes take place regarding the content published on an article. The game designer is Jimmy Wales, who started the site 20 years ago, and was reportedly a big fan of MMORPGs of the 80s, like Island of Kazmai and Scepter of Goth, end quote. And that humorous essay is an actual page on Wikipedia that you can read all about this tongue-in-cheek theory, and it is quite comprehensive. For example, administrators are called game masters, and they have all sorts of tools at their disposal, such as ice blocks, or blocking editors, a spell to cave in a dungeon, or delete a page, and teleporting, or importing pages. It's a fun idea to play around with, and apart from many Wikipedians and its founder being big RPG fans, the joke likely began because there are some similarities between the Wikipedia culture and practices as it's developed and actual RPGs. For one, editors can elect to identify themselves with a persona, which are all categorized as Wikifauna, and pull from common fantasy themes. Quoting Wired, "Some editors, for example, identify as Wiki-Eagles, using their keen vision to detect and fix small errors like misplaced commas. Or Wiki-Fairies, that beautify Wikipedia by organizing messy articles or making stylistic improvements. Or Wiki-Gnomes, the kind of user who tends to make small incremental edits, such as adding categories to articles." End quote. I went to the taxonomy page and particularly enjoyed the Wiki Hobbit and Wiki Ogre personas. A Wiki Hobbit, quote, "is described as having desirable traits of an editor, developing expertise niches and evading heavy arguments unless forced to make a valiant stand, often against heavily armored adversaries. Sadly, they are not immune to the temptations of power." End quote. And a Wiki Ogre, quote, "is described as having traits of an editor who can sometimes be inactive for periods of anything from days, weeks, or months, but often engage in a rampage of activity, editing wildly." End quote. I also love this description from Wired of the quest of a couple of Wiki-Ents. Quote, "When Gina Valentine and Heather Hart were undergrad art students, they noticed that black artists were treated differently in their art history courses. If they covered black artists at all, they were segregated to 1 week on the Harlem Renaissance," Hart recalled. Later, they found that Black artists did not have Wikipedia pages due to the lack of historical coverage of minorities. Together, they co-founded the project Black Lunch Table, whose mission is to fill in the holes of art history. The project has hosted dozens of edit-a-thons, community events to expand Wikipedia's coverage of Black artists. Valentine and Hart identify as Wiki-Ents, a role that's focused on improving Wikipedia and promoting peaceful interactions. End quote. Just a quick side note, what an amazing duo that their last names are literally Valentine and Hart. But anyways, creating pages and editing them with the proper citations is quite the undertaking. And Darius Jamilniak, a professor at Kosminski University and the author of Common Knowledge in Ethnography of Wikipedia, told Wired that this is another area where Wikipedia can resemble an RPG, even if in this case it's not meaning to. He says Wikipedians can be reluctant to recognize external expertise. Quoting again, "Consider this example. A new user logs onto Wikipedia, changes the content of an article, and writes, 'I'm entitled to make this change because I have a graduate degree in this subject.' Not only would this person likely be perceived as a prig, but their reasoning is unlikely to succeed on Wikipedia. That's because Wikipedians generally believe that arguments must stand or fall based on their merit and alignment with Wikipedia policies, such as whether the statement is verified with citations to reliable third-party sources. Editors build their online street credentials, or in gaming terms, experience points, by developing articles and increasing their edit counts. As Jamilniak explains, it feels very bizarre when somebody from the brick-and-mortar world swoops in and claims that they should have the same credibility in the Wikipedia RPG because of their credentials. That would be like a character in a D&D adventure suddenly proclaiming that they were in charge of the medieval literature dungeon because they happened to have a doctorate in the subject. Basically, it's cheating by not recognizing the rules of the game itself." End quote. And based solely on how much my head swims, both when trying to figure out how to edit a Wikipedia page while following all of the rules, and when I try to understand most RPGs, this comparison adds up to me. But even if that insular nature may come out sometimes, Wikimedia overall as an organization and a movement has done a tremendous service to the world, and I hope that they stick around for many, many more birthdays in the future. And finally today, there is officially a game of 2020, because isn't reliving 2020 exactly what you want to do right now? It's a side-scrolling browser game that takes you through the major events of 2020, like the Australian wildfires, lockdown, the US elections, and eventually the vaccine, as well as some common experiences like buying toilet paper, forgetting to unmute on Zoom, and scrolling through TikTok. There's also little background details throughout, like a 5G tower and a mural for George Floyd. It's pretty easy to play through even for someone who sucks at video games, and honestly, it was more fun and better executed than I thought it would be. It also has a pretty solid ending, so it's worth checking out and spending a few minutes to play around on. Link in the show notes. So one more thing before I go. Monday here in the United States is Martin Luther King Day, which does double duty as the National Day of Service, so named by Congress in 1994, and the idea is to take a day on instead of a day off by serving your community, in honor of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s commitment to the power of service and bettering communities. You can learn more and find a COVID-safe volunteer opportunity near you at the link to the official website in the show notes. But that is it from me for today. I hope you all have a wonderful weekend, and I will talk to you again on Monday.